Welcome to Wildspire. You get to be a fly on the wall for my intimate conversations with entrepreneurs who are changing the world. I'm your host, Stephanie Benedetto, coach, storyteller, and unmarketer at The Awakened Business, helping coaches and change-making entrepreneurs unleash their inspired message and share it with playful unmarketing. I'll ask curious questions and explore uncharted waters with my guest today. Anything can happen when we step into the unknown of infinite creativity, and that's where we're going to play. My guest today is Meghan Gilroy. She is such a delight to have a conversation with, especially about the topic of sisterhood, which is where we begin our conversation. It is expansive. We talk about feminine power, what it means to be fully shining, and creating from our heart's desire. Meghan Gilroy is a spiritual leader and the creator of the Fully Shining Women Leading Our World movement and the founder of the Fully Shining Women Wisdom School. Her sole purpose is to catalyze a true sisterhood of smart, conscious, capable, caring women to unleash our feminine power so we can break through our blocks and barriers, answer our soul callings, and ignite bigger potential in ourselves, our lives, our communities, and the world. She believes that every woman deserves to create a life where she feels seen, heard, fulfilled, and supported. When she creates positive ripples in the world around her and can contribute to solving the pressing problems that we face today, from personal, local, to global. Named a spiritual leader for the next generation in her early 20s by international best-selling author of The Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, she has now worked with thousands of women around the world online and through retreats, workshops, and women's circles in the U.S., Mexico, Peru, and Europe. Meghan inspires women who wonder how to truly enjoy a meaningful life with time for self-care and wellness through her own story of walking away from a life of stress, resentment, and exhaustion as a recovering, people-pleasing, overachieving perfectionist who built multiple seven-figure businesses only to realize she wasn't happy. Now living on a small ranch in a tiny mountain town in Colorado in a blended family, Meghan navigates following her intuition and purpose while empowering women to walk their own path towards happiness and soul success so we can create a better and brighter world for all. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Meghan Gilroy. Hi, Meghan, and welcome to Wildspire. I'm so pleased to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie. I'm excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. And your dazzling smile.
Thank you. I feel like you're glowing today too, so there must be some good light and good energy here.
I guess so. You have some good mojo going.
Yeah.
So when we talked earlier, I was so struck by, and I can't say exactly what it was, but there's something very alive when you talk about this idea of sisterhood and what it means to you. Yeah, like your whole being just goes, yes. Right? So will you tell me a little bit about what that is? Like, what is sisterhood and what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So I did not grow up having sisters. And the idea of sisterhood just really fills my heart because I feel that especially in today's world, that us women just crave having that connection and having a place to be vulnerable, be seen, be heard, be held, be supported. And I know when my husband and I moved to our tiny little mountain town, that was a huge priority for me, is to really be in a place where there were other women who had similar values and who were interested in exploring spirituality and mindful parenting and women's empowerment. And what I found here so lit me up that I realized there's so many places in the world that women don't have that, or we've had experiences where, I know when I was in high school and college, I was more comfortable with the guys, or women who've had experiences where they don't feel like other women have their back. And for me to be able to be a catalyst to bring women together as fully shining women who are leaders in our world, and to really create that safe space to be real and authentic, I just find that there's so much juice there. And right now there's so much chaos in our world and transformation going on, that feels especially important to have that. And so not only is there that benefit for the individual sister, but I also see sisterhood as this network that exists among women. And I can feel that kind of energetic across the planet. And I just believe in the power of each one of us waking up and speaking up and supporting each other, and what power and potential we have when we do that.
So that's what I felt too. I think as soon as you started talking about sisterhood as a network, and I had this sense of a movement rising up or rising out, rising from within, emerging.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what is it like for the women who come to your sisterhood, the community that you're creating?
Mm-hmm.
Where are they when they come in? And
Mm-hmm.
then what happens when they join the energy of this sisterhood and they begin to connect? Like, what's that experience like?
Yeah. So the women that tend to be attracted to my community are smart and conscious and capable and caring. They're often on a spiritual or personal growth path, and they're interested in how can they really tap into their feminine power. And by that, I mean your intuition, being in tune with your own energetic cycles and cycles in nature, being in a more fluid state as opposed to being super logical and linear and strategic and structured. And that there's some level of awareness that there's something that might have been holding us back. So I personally believe that we are all fully shining women, and oftentimes we're in the process of becoming her and allowing her to really come out of us. And when we take the time to explore, like, where aren't we doing sacred self-care? Where are we not prioritizing ourselves first while still taking care of the rest of our world? Where are we just in that place of somehow dimming our light, dimming our passion, dimming our pleasure? That when we have that kind of awareness and we actually see that other women are going through this too, that you're not alone, amazing transformations happen. I mean, we've had so many really cool outward manifestations in our community, whether it's moving to a place you've always dreamed of, or getting your book launched, or launching a business, any of those kind of more tangible things. But then to me, the bigger reward is that each woman is in that place of saying, wow, I feel more worthy. I trust myself more. I trust my intuition more. I am starting to celebrate myself instead of constantly be so hard on ourselves. And it just feels so good. And I know this is a journey I've had to go on myself to make those kind of shifts in community, because not everyone in the world is interested in those kind of topics. And oftentimes our families or our partners or others around us might be more interested in the status quo. And so when you're saying, hey, I want to change, I actually want to feel happier, I want to, explore how I can make a bigger impact on the world, and you don't feel supported, it's such a struggle. And when you're in that space of other women saying, I hear you, I see you, I accept you, I'm cheering for you, then I that's where I see our women make some really big shifts and see inward results and outer results.
Do these women come in, Meghan, are they nervous? Like, do they have an idea of what it's going to be like to be a part of a community of women, or are they already converts about the power of that?
I think a lot of times there is a nervousness, because I know when you hear that word, fully shining woman, it both makes something like rise in you, and it might bring up that question, like, am I a fully shining woman, and what does that even mean? And so for me, it does not mean perfect. It means that you're in a process, that you're willing to share all of you, not just put the fake smile on your face, but to really be genuine and authentic and real. And to say, I believe that I have something to give to this world, whether it's in your home or at work or volunteering or out in the activism arena. And it can be scary to step into that. So I think we have a wide variety. We have some people who are definitely been on a spiritual path for years, and they're maybe a little clearer about what their vision is and what their heart's desire is and how to activate that. And they want additional support. And then other women are kind of just waking up and exploring what this might mean. and dipping their feet into how to drop into that really juiciness inside of themselves, and then to also feel safe. It can take some time to just feel trusting. And what I love is I just see the women in my community are so accepting and permission giving. And we also often talk about like contagious dream weaving, that if you're willing to share your dreams and your visions, and not just the swampy bogginess that can happen in our everyday life, it ignites something in each one of us, and we're all a little more inspired.
So that brings up something for me that it was sparked a minute or two ago, and then it came back. So I'm going to mention.
Okay, cool.
So I heard you say two different things. And I'm not saying either is right or wrong, by the way. I'm just sort of wondering about it. So one thing you said was, I believe we're all already fully shining women. Like, and it's kind of a matter of the feeling I get from that is like just dropping away or, clearing away anything that's covering that up, to go with that metaphor. Like we're already exactly that. There's nothing to do to make that happen. And then there was something you said about looking at the areas of our lives when we're really not fully shining just yet, whatever that is. And this came up in the context of a conversation some months ago that I'm recalling. And a meditation teacher, she's a yoga and meditation instructor. And she said, a lot of meditations begin by, tune into your body and notice the tension. And one day it just occurred to her to, instead of noticing the tension and then go into the tension and release it, to notice the part of you, the area of your body that feels the most spacious, the most expansive, the most beautiful, to go into the beautiful feeling and then expand it into the rest of your being. And so it sort of reminded me of that, the difference between noticing that you are already a fully shining woman and going into whatever that brings up in you, whether you happen to identify as a male or female or something else, however you identify, to go into that fully shining part of yourself and allow it to expand, versus looking at an area of your life where you feel like, oh, I'm not shining, or I'm not being myself there. And like, I'm not sure exactly what I'm proposing, but like, what do you notice about that? And
I'm a big proponent of the both and that are true, right? Like oftentimes our mind wants it to be one way or the other. And what I've seen in my own life is that the more I can tap into that inner knowing, the more I can tap into that spaciousness and the godness or the goddessness, and allow that to expand, that's one way. That's the connection route, right? You're plugging into both yourself and something perhaps greater than you. And then there's also the clearing piece, that it is, when you put your attention on the light, it does illuminate the dark or the shadow or what's holding you back. And denying that doesn't really help, in my opinion. That if we can acknowledge that and embrace that and love that part of ourselves and see what gifts it has to offer, that it not only helps clear it, but oftentimes it might give us a clue about a strength or a gift that we have. And so I find that when you do both of those things in harmony, that you can absolutely feel like, yes, there is this light-filled being inside of me, or there's this wise woman inside of me, or a wild woman inside of me, or fully shining woman inside of me, that gives you a lot of strength and power. And then at the same time, we live in a human-based earth that, I see the times when I get triggered by my kids, or I get tripped up by something my husband says, or my own beliefs about not enough or not trusting come up. And if I'm willing to look at those, then that does that kind of clearing, sloughing off part that you were referring to. And it allows that connection, brightness part to get even bigger.
I like that. And what I saw when you said that is that here's something that it's looking like for me. A lot of times if somebody comes to me, they might be, they're coming to a coach, they're coming to a mentor, they're coming to someone. Usually there's, not always, but usually there's some kind of a challenge or a thing or, something that looks like it needs to be changed, or they'd like to change it. Right.
Yeah.
So they're maybe a little more in touch with the areas where I feel like I'm not shining. There may be a little, and so they bring that. And what I'm finding is that when we go to the place within where they are already fully shining, where they touch that,
Yep.
that which is the source of all that light, right? And we touch that and settle into it and really know it and expand with it. And then we revisit the area that where it looks like I haven't been shining.
Yeah.
It looks really different from that place. You know, like it's a whole other experience. It's like, oh, I forgot what I really am. And I just need to remember here.
Yeah. I love that description, because in the Fully Shining Women Wisdom School, we have what we call the spiral path. And we start in the east, which is a direction of new beginnings and a direction of light. Like if you think about the sun rising in the east. And I find that when you really tap into your heart's desire, that is what you truly want. So let's say, for example, you're thinking like, hey, I want a new car, and you decide it's going to be a red Prius. And then what your desire really is, like, you want transportation that's not making an impact on the environment, and you allow that, oh, like the bicycle shows up, or someone like gives a car to you that gets decent gas mileage. Like, it could come to you in many different ways. And I feel like that's paralleling what you're saying, is that when we can remember that we're powerful creators, and that we have this ability to tap into not like the literal, I want to make a change in my business, or I want to make a change in my diet, but there's some deeper underlying desire that we can connect into. And then we can be open to how it might appear, which might not be the way our mind thinks it's going to come to us. That's, to me, when like the magic and the mystery start happening in life. And I find that as well, that a lot of times when women come to me and they say, I want to create a soul-led business, and then they tap in and they realize like, oh, there's actually a piece around connection, or a piece around the impact they want to make. And they might actually need to go look at something in their relationship, or they might need to go look at something in their childhood, or look at some other piece. If they address that first, it actually helps them revisit that first initial idea of what it is that they were looking for. And that's such a more feminine path, right? It's not that, hey, I want the business, and I know if I do XYZ steps or XYZ strategies, I'm going to get that. It's more about tapping into that intuition, and tapping into that inner knowing, and tapping into that heart's desire, and then letting the universe co-create that with us.
This is reminding me a conversation I had earlier today, where we were talking about creating from desire versus creating from lack. And that they can sometimes be confused if people don't know. I'm going to speak for myself, right? Because I can really only do that. I think for a long time, when I envisioned something that I wanted for myself, whether I could articulate it, whether I knew exactly what it looked like or not, it was coming from a sense of, when I get that thing, I will feel something that I don't feel right now.
Yeah.
And even though it might have been a very positive, like I desire it, underneath it was this feeling of incompleteness or lack, like I don't have. And I'm not sure that it was 100% that, right? Like, I don't think it was only that. There actually was also a pure like, hey, I just want to see what it's like to do this, to have this, to be this, to experience this. There was that too. As I'm sitting with it, I'm like, it wasn't just one, but underneath it was this current of like, I need it to make my life better, to make me better, to have a better experience, like a misunderstanding of where my experience really comes from.
Yeah.
And it was always at play, and I just didn't see it. It's not a bad thing. It's just, okay, it's a thing that happens. And then as I realized that my needs are met, like right now, that all the underneath the drive for all the things is how I think it's going to make me feel. What I imagine, what I associate with having or doing or being that thing, the way it feels. When I started to know like, oh, that feeling is created in me, and I can create it actually in this moment, there was a different kind of desire that came about that wasn't a desire from, and it feels so different. It feels cleaner to me, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
because now I don't need it. Now there's no lack that it's filling.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that I don't have a drive or enthusiasm or
Mm-hmm.
engagement to pursue it. It just means that I meet it in a way that it's not so personal if it doesn't happen. It's not like, oh God, I don't turn it into a story about how, this always happens to me, or I'll never be good enough to,
Right.
or I need to, okay, well, I just have to pick myself up, brush myself off, and get myself back out there because I am, there's something beautiful about that determination, but it's also a way that we can torture ourselves a little bit at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I see that this thing that, I have talked about is unattached desire that is possible when we don't need anything,
Mm-hmm.
but we'd love to see what we can create and see what's
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Yeah, I'm really hearing that like self-sourced desire, right? Where you're saying, oh, like if I want an experience of abundance. I remember when one of my first spiritual teachers, I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And I was saying like, oh, I want that money. And she challenged me to say like, can you see abundance all around you? Like, can you
Yeah.
see it in the mountains outside your window and the beautiful colors in your office or the number of books you had? And there's some combination of realizing that, oh, I wanted to feel this inner experience of being abundant, and it didn't have to necessarily look at like dollars in my bank account. I could see reflections of that when I just shifted my perspective on what it was. And then at the same time, there was a desire for things that money can allow us to experience or buy. And so, yeah, it's that interesting thing of like, can you create a desire that reflects that kind of deeper truth of what it is that you're wanting to experience? And it's not really about something outside of you. And then at the same time, like we can have fun and play in the creation of whatever experience we might want to have that matches that self-sourced desire that's within us.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And I think it's a worthwhile distinction, at least for me, because I can sense it. Like I can feel the difference when I like that word self-sourced or inner sourced,
Mm-hmm.
that it feels different. It's a creation as a result of an overflow, as a result of abundance versus from the inside versus going towards something, reaching for something that I don't have to fill something that I think is missing inside. And I'm not saying this at all to say that like, oh, it's more worthy to create your own reality inside. I remember having a conversation with a dear friend of mine who does a lot of meditation, and in the deepest states of meditation, that's, we're in that, it's not even just the deepest states of meditation, but her experience of it was there that, oh, wow, I have everything. I have the experience of everything I could ever ask for.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I possibly want to get up and do something? Why would I possibly want to, I don't need to. Like she, in that time, had lost her desire to create in the world of form because it was more real to her to just be in touch with that formless than it was to, roll up her sleeves and dive in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like there's a right or a wrong in that, but there's a joy in that kind of overflowing creation, like that feels to me like it wants to happen through us as humans. Like it's kind of part of our gift is that we can conceive of something, envision an idea, and then do things, make choices, create stories, try things, experiment, and create it in the world. And I love that we can. And it's a totally different experience than the feeling of having it. Because every moment is different. Every moment has its own flavor. Like it's constantly fresh and new. I'm not sure if I'm getting at something in particular, but I don't think I am. Maybe you'll hear it, but I'm like, oh, it's just really interesting to me that while I am completely creating the experience inside of myself that I'm having right now, like the way that I feel, the things that I'm seeing in you. I said, your dazzling smile, like the experience of that is created in me. And I am seeing it in you because that's what's happening in me.
Right.
And yet we get to have a conversation. We get to create it in a way that I couldn't create it in my imagination. There's a freshness, there's an aliveness to it. There's like an element of surprise, and it might not go the way I think. Like that's kind of cool in creating.
For sure. I mean, I feel like we live in a creative, abundant universe, right? And there's life force flowing through our human bodies that wants to come out through our eyes and our hands and our mouth and our ears. So we're of course, there's times when we may want to be sitting in that meditative state. And then some of us are also called to be of service in the world, or called to share this energy in some way. And to me, it's so exciting that the more you tune into that heart's desire, that really shining place, and keep letting go of anything that's stopping you from sharing that light, it's just like then we get to bump into each other in ways that we can pass on the love, or pass on the understanding, or pass on the creativity and inspiration. And I'm not like stomping into the supermarket pissed off about something, and instead I'm sharing my anger, right? Or I'm going into my house exhausted and tired and snapping at my kids. So there is something to me really delightful about being able to dip into the spiritual and tangible, energetic side, and then also bring that into the practical, everyday side, and see how we want to make an impact on the world around us.
Yeah, I think that is one of the most beautiful ways that we can express our creativity in the world, as those who feel called to help and serve in some way, is to create change. It's creative. It's immensely creative. It's what I love about business. It is every bit as creative as, there's nothing more or less creative, but I see it as alive and organic as choosing to have a child.
Sure.
Or planting a garden.
Yeah.
Or cooking a meal. Any of these things, like it's so alive. It's not less organic and fueled by creativity in the moment than art, than painting a portrait. It's the same aliveness that inspires it, even though it might be a business with things like marketing plans and customer avatars and messaging and whatever other labels and advertising campaigns and things like that.
Yeah.
It still comes from that. I love returning to the source of that, like recognizing the source of that creation. Sometimes that takes something that seems very serious and, like I have to be careful with it and do it right, and reminds me that it has a life of its own that I can tend to and follow.
Yeah. Especially when you're doing a business that's soul-led, right? Or heart-based, and you have that motivation to share something authentic and true to you, something that comes from your soul plan, or the reason why you're here on the planet, and to be able to channel that into all the business structures that it takes to create that mechanism that connects you to your clients is such a huge gift. And I know for myself, I went on that spiritual path where I did a lot of work and healing in more kind of private areas, where it might be in my relationship with my husband, or with my kids, or in my home. But then to say, okay, now I'm feeling inspired to create a business, which means I need to be visible in the world, and I need to be heard in the world. And I'm putting myself out there in a way that the world is going to have opinions and reflections to me about. That is to me, a deeper evolution. So I always see, for those of us who choose to go on that kind of entrepreneurial journey, that you're actually making this invitation to yourself to spiritually evolve through your business. And I see that all the time, that if, a lot of times I'll have people come to me asking about marketing or sales process or something that's nitty gritty. And if you don't really look at what's underneath
Mm.
those questions of, where are you not showing up fully? Where are you not trusting yourself fully? Where, if you don't feel like you're well received on the planet or in your personal relationships, and that's going to show up when you make an offer to your clients. So
Mm.
I see when you really explore that place of uniquely creating a business, right? Because I don't know, there's something so tender about putting yourself out there in that way. It's not like you're saying, hey, I'm just signing up to be an insurance agent, right? That's pretty well defined. Like people know what that is. You're saying, I want to create something that's uniquely me, that's coming through and out into the world. That takes a lot of guts, and it often takes a lot of healing.
Mm. I'm laughing because earlier today I had a conversation with someone, and after we were done, he said to me, I thought you were a business coach. I laughed so hard because our conversation was about pressure.
Yeah.
And how we create our experience.
Mm-hmm.
And where we source that resilience within.
Yeah.
And it was all about that because it's becoming more and more clear. I mean, I've kind of been on to this for years, but it's really becoming more glaringly obvious that I can't really do an effective job talking about the game of business. We cannot play the game of business until we recognize and understand how the game of life, being human, works.
Mm-hmm.
And there are just a couple simple things that we need to know, like how our experience is created and what we really are and how we're made of God stuff, just that.
Right.
Like, but seriously, like once we know that, like there is nothing off limits. Like you can play. And I love that. And I see this too, that you're hearing the question, the exploration underneath the question when somebody says, well, should I do this or this for my business? Should I do Facebook ads or Google AdWords?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think I should start a membership? Should I charge this price or this price? Like what's under that, right? Like what's really going on there? What's the misunderstanding that's driving that question? Because sure, we have questions, but we find the guidance within.
Right.
And probably part of that guidance was leading them to you to ask Meghan this question in the first place so that you could show them the thing that they're not seeing.
Right.
I'm making up a whole story there, but I see that happening. Like we're always so guided, whether we are listening to it, whether we are heeding it or not. And I love how just knowing that we can drop out of the mind chatter and just, what do I hear? What is the whisper right now?
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, tapping into that intuitive place. And it definitely applies in business and also, questions you have about parenting, right? Or your health or running a marathon, really any experience we have in life to me are about those deeper questions of, what is it that feels right and true to you? What is it? How can you trust yourself to create this experience? I know when we are having some kind of challenge with one of our children, I have to look at myself of how am I creating that environment to begin with? And how do I have a choice to treat myself differently? I'll see it in my son who's a teenager, and sometimes he'll, want to do something so perfectly. And I have to look at myself and go, wow, I can be so hard on myself and have such high expectations on myself that obviously he's absorbed that. And now that I've started to look at how could I be gentler on myself, or how could I let myself be messy and experiment with creating a podcast, or experiment with, creating a movement or any other things that inspire me in my life, that's where I find a lot more energy and a lot more inspiration and creativity. And I really hear what you're saying about if you don't look at what's underneath the question, because usually any question we have in life, there's some deeper part that it's like a soul question is being asked. Our soul wants us to hear something, explore something, see something so that we can again, like shine our light, share our impact, right? Be of service in some way to ourselves or to others. And that's often where the richness comes in.
Hmm. Something occurred to me that I would love to ask you about and ask what you see in this, because there's in what's described as feminine power and the feminine energies and feminine creativity, there is this idea of the the dark, earthy unknown of creation. Like the phrase is like on the tip of my tongue, and I'm not finding it in the moment, but the fertile dark.
The fertile void.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
So there's something so evocative about it. And since you're in this sisterhood, what are you seeing about that?
Yeah. That's a big question. So one of the things that I see is that we live in this culture of perpetual harvest, right? If you're in business, you want every launch to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Or, if we're in a consumeristic world, we want more and more and more of our things. And we don't often give ourselves the opportunity to travel through that spiral path I was mentioning, where you're going through all phases of creation. And to me, the fertile void is winter. It's the dark moon. It's silence. It's stillness. It's really tuning to what's true within, and where's that place that you allow yourself to go fallow and allow yourself to have that rest, and let that maybe there's some part of you that's enraged by something, or maybe there's a part of you that's really enlivened by something. But if you're constantly in busyness, or you're constantly in doingness, then you can't hear that part of you, and you can't drop into, like I think about when I walk outside here in Colorado when it's new moon time and the sky is dark, and it's just like the expansiveness of the deep inky sky with those stars, right? To just drop into that possibility and that what's next kind of energy. And that's what I feel like is often missing, both in our individual lives and culturally. And I think that's what we're hearing rising, right? Whether it's the Me Too movement, or, the divine feminine rising, or the earth making her rumblings and shakings known, is that this part of us that we've really suppressed. And, it's not tidy, it's messy, it's not convenient. We often want to skip over that phase because we'd rather get back into the creation or the shining your light or illumination phase, or the harvest phase, rather than that, that quieter, more inward space where you can tap in and tune in.
I think that's such a beautiful metaphor. Thank you for sharing that, Meghan. I hear it in a different way from you. There's this misunderstanding, and because I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, I see it in the context of business, but it extends far beyond that, and creating other things too. But that we should be able to have this constant, we should always be in flow. And flow means I am at 10, I am optimal, I'm optimized, right? And I should always be going like that. And I'm like, that's not how creation works. At least it's not my experience of creation. It's got a rhythm. It's got seasons. There's a time for everything. There's a time to go inward and reflect and incubate. Think about, if we give birth, actually, there's a gestation period. There's a period where it looks like nothing is happening, and there's a miracle of life growing inside of you.
Yeah.
A whole other, something that is being created that didn't exist before, and it's growing and changing by the moment and evolving, right? And you don't see a thing. And then you start to just be able to see the signs of it and stuff. But there's a lot of, it doesn't look like something's happening on the outside, but there's a lot happening. And I'm often reminding people of that, like as they're telling me, like, oh, I'm not doing anything for my business. And then they'll tell me, but this is happening and this is happening. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
okay, because you're not doing it and it doesn't look like hustle,
Outward.
it doesn't count.
Yeah.
Like that is the bulk of the miracle happens underground, behind the scenes, in the
Yeah.
womb. It's
In the
only
seed.
yes, it's like
Yeah.
that's where the life is kindled. And it's
Yeah.
only, I mean, just because we don't see it until it emerges in the form doesn't mean that it wasn't alive before that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true for you and maybe some of your listeners, is I noticed that if I'm in that really constant pushing 10 energy, I just go towards exhaustion and resentment and frustration and impatience. And when I'm in this more feminine cycle of energy where there are times when it's inward and quiet, there's times when it's emerging and you're, exploring, and then there's times when it's like full out, maybe you're launching or publicizing, and then times to assess and what worked, what didn't work. When I really allow those cycles, what I realized is that my like true creativity and true voice can't come through if I don't have the quiet time. So I actually have times each day where I'm letting that inspiration and those downloads come, because if I'm just constantly in the outwardness, at least for me, it's really hard for me to come up with something that's more original or a different point of view. And I know there's so many coaches and healers out there who are trying to put together their business, and they've been really well trained, but then what is it that you want to say that's unique or different, or how do you want to put together a program or an offering or a lifestyle or a song or whatever your creation is that's unique to you? And I just find that the more I've let go of the to-do list or let go of that idea, I have to maximize something, and instead get into the flow of like, oh, right now I'm inspired to do this. And oh yeah, that's next. And well, what about this idea? No, that's like a cool idea, but it doesn't have total energy to it. And I have that more spaciousness in my schedule and in my business and my life, that then I'm actually attracting really what I want to me, and what I'm putting out there has like more power and vibrancy, because it's not just a mad scramble, or it's not just recycling things over and over again. And I didn't really realize that when I was in that more online markety, constant creation stage, because I didn't realize how much time it took to really get to the originality or get to something that's just being said differently or being shared differently. And that's like a huge wish I have for everyone listening, is to give yourself that time and space, and to recognize that when you create something, if you don't give it time to be destroyed or be transformed or be composted or be, recycled, I mean, the planet wouldn't function without winter or without the dark moon or without night. And there's a lot going on in those times.
It's a beautiful reminder, Megan. And I do see that also. It's what I feel, and what you're saying is feeling for the timing of the thing. It has its own timing. It has its own season, the rhythms, and the way you're seeing it and tuning into it through nature. I mean, the seasons, the actual seasons, the phases of the moon, which often women do feel quite connected to,
Sure.
Our very cycle changes with the moon.
Yeah.
And women together find a rhythm. Their cycles often regulate. There is something to it that it teaches us. And I don't always or often think about it externally that way for myself, but I can feel it. I can feel the rhythm. I can feel the flow of what's happening in me. And I've not connected it with things. I've tried and it just didn't work for me. Like, I'm like, I feel like I'm making it all this mental thing, like what phase of the moon. And at one point, there was an experiment I did where I was looking at which which sign, astrological sign was in the moon and what phase and like what it's, and I was like, it just was like too much work for me.
Yeah.
But just simply being, I noticed that there are times when I just need to rest.
Yep.
It might be half a day and it might be quite a bit longer. It might be a string of days.
Yeah.
I noticed that as the days were shifting, even though I'm in a very warm location, the days are shifting and I noticed my body shifting with it. Like I noticed myself slowing down a bit and I was like, oh, we're coming on winter. I can feel it. I can feel that hibernation, incubation, despite the temperatures that I may have outside here. The days are shorter. There's something seasonal happening. And then I can feel these days where I'm like, ideas, ideas, ideas. Who are these ideas for? I don't know. Is this for you? Here, I've got tons. Take them.
Yeah.
Like I can't use them all. And it's something I can ride. It's like the tide going in and the tide going out. And it has a timing of its own. And it does not conform to my mind's idea of how long it should take. And I should be here by now. What's wrong with me? I should be able to do this in 6 months. And it is 7 months. My deadline, or whatever deadlines that we create, it has its own. And when we go with it, it's just so much easier than trying to fight to make something happen that happens on its own.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, so many memories and stories are coming up around that because I felt it personal experience like Trump's moon cycles or sun cycles or any other cycle. And, my daughter came home a couple weeks ago, just like in tears. And normally she's pretty put together and she had a really rough day at school. And I said to her, do you know what time the moon is? Because we're actually in a rural area where the moon is very prevalent. Like it's daylight when full moon time is here. And I said to her during full moon time, oftentimes our emotions can feel really up. And during new moon time, that's often the time when everything seems like it's wrong and we're just kind of seeing like what's not working. And when she made that connection between like what she was feeling in the cycle of the moon, it just helped her realize that this wasn't just her, that she's part of something bigger, and that seemed to soothe her. And I've also seen that in like my relationship with my husband, when we've just like had times where we feel like really out of sync or there's really a lot of tension going on, and realizing like, oh, it's just going to take time to let that unravel. I had a woman say when her husband passed, she's like, we had some really good decades. And I'm like, what a great perspective, right? Because we're in a culture that's so immediate, like press a button and something's ordered, to see like, right, there are bigger cycles. And I know a lot of the women in the wisdom school, they appreciate having that connection made so that if it feels confusing around what phase is the moon in or what energy might that be, or, to be able to look at, well, you might be in a north, you might be in a northernly energy, which tends to be that elder, that crone, that like acceptance, resilience, forgiveness, wisdom phase. And yet maybe there's an energy from the south that's really beneficial for you right now. Or maybe you are passing through one of these directions or passing through one of these phases that we're talking about. And it helps you to pause and see like, what can I take in that would be supportive, and what might I let go of judging myself because I'm just simply, it's not the time right now. It's not the phase. And I see that the more I let go of the timeline or let go how it's supposed to be, and give myself those times for reflection and introspection, give myself times for action that feels aligned, give myself times of fallowness and times of, big out there-ness. I just feel like I feel more in tune with myself. And I also see like oddly more like results or output, right? Because then I'm not just like doing things for the sake of doing them. I'm doing them because it is the right time. It is, I'm not like forcing something out of me, or I'm not, pushing so hard that I'm just depleting myself. And I think the more we can model that, because that's not a common way to live in our society, the more it inspires other women, and the more it helps share a kinder way to be living and walking with our feet on this planet.
Just knowing that It's okay for my energy to ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for me to be extroverted and outward motivated and also introverted and
Mm-hmm.
inwardly reflective. That
Yeah.
there's a time for everything, that it's all normal, it's all okay, it's all natural. Let's say the word natural, because
Natural.
normal is like, we see a lot of people trying to push and hustle and make things happen and figure things out of time without regard for the timeliness of them. That's
Yeah.
actually pretty normal, that kind of stress. But natural is like what's actually our natural state. And it's up and down,
Yeah.
in and out.
Yeah.
It
Inhale,
ebbs and
exhale.
flows. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Exactly. And, some days I feel great and have tons of energy, and some days I don't feel so great and I don't have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And it's not wrong.
Yeah, my husband sometimes teases me because I do have that real driver energy oftentimes, that achiever energy. And on the weekends, like sometimes I'll feel guilty for just lying on the couch or, sitting around doing nothing. And it's been a great reflection to me to remember that that is normal. I'm sorry, I like your word, natural. And that I didn't really have that modeled for me, right? My mom was a working mom, and she also did a lot in the home and in the community. And it's like she was always, having to take care of something. And for me to realize like, oh, I'm actually modeling to my daughter that it's okay to rest. It's okay to take exhales and downtimes. And that when I do take that, I fill myself back up. So I can be more patient and loving with her. I can be more creative in my business, or I can, give something back to my community. And that just, to me, feels so much kinder to ourselves, right? If we're not hearing that voice in our head saying, you're not worthy of rest, or you're not good enough to just be. And I know that's something that I'm still learning and practicing. And I feel like with so many women that we're having to retrain ourselves, that we don't need to be in that, like I used to think life was just like constant upward
Mm-hmm.
diagonal motion. And I'm like, oh, you know what? For a while, I thought it was like you go up and you plateau and you go up and you plateau. And now it's like, no, it feels very cyclical to me. And it feels actually good to be in harmony with those kind of cycles.
Mm. Yeah, I see that too. So I think the idea of feminine power with the very needed awareness that was brought to this through the feminist movement, and then as it's evolved, it almost seems like some people see it as adversarial with the masculine power dynamic or the patriarchy. Like you have the matriarchy and you have patriarchy, and like this is better, And I didn't get that sense at all when we were talking about power in that way. But there's a misunderstanding about what it means. And I think a lot of women, I know, I'll speak for myself, I had a lot of misunderstandings about what it means to be a powerful woman. I think for a while, I thought that it meant I had to be like men.
Yeah,
I had
exactly.
to have that masculine power dynamic.
Yeah.
And then I actually did have an experience of deeper relationships with women, and this like mysterious, that I think we could call like the fertile void or something like that it's not a sex or gender thing necessarily, but it does have an energy that we express as a metaphor of feminine, that there's a different kind of power that is possible. And it's not just for women, it's also for men. So like, what are you seeing about that? Like, what is it like as the sisterhood rises as in their own feminine power?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to that, because it's true. I feel like there's archetypal feminine energy, divine feminine energy, and there's distorted feminine energy. And the same is true of masculine, right? So depending on what your intent is, if you're saying, hey, I want to create that heart's desire of feeling cherished or delighted or supported or whatever it is, it can be hard to then just solely apply more archetypal masculine energy of being focused and goal driven and planned and strategic. But if you want to build a house, then awesome. Like we had a construction business where it really worked to have phases and plans and step-by-steps. And so to me, it's really finding that right blend and combination for you. And what I noticed, because I grew up with a mom who was a feminist in the 70s, and it was really much that message, like you can do anything. And the underlying message was, if you're like a man, or if you want to play in a man's world. And so for me, it's been this real process of redefining, when I lead with feminine power, most of like the magic and the synchronicity and the really cool, amazing things in my life has happened when I've been more in that state of intuition or leaps of faith, or, trusting something that makes absolutely no sense until you look back in hindsight. And then from there, I can say, great, I might want to take some of these more traditionally masculine tools and strategies and apply it to that, so that I'm creating my life that I want. I'm creating my heart's desire. And before, when I had it kind of flip-flopped, that I was primarily oriented towards the achievement and the goals and the plan, I'm like, I always felt stuck. I didn't feel like I was allowed to enjoy my life. I didn't feel like I was creating the life that I really knew that was possible. And so that's what I see, is that there's this big rebalancing on the planet, that sometimes the feminine is coming through with that roar because it's been so suppressed for so long. And it's like that pendulum swinging, right? We've been in a very kind of masculine, patriarchal energy, and now we're moving into also inviting and welcoming the feminine. And so for me, it's funny, because I'm like, sometimes I don't even I'm like, I don't even know what to say about the patriarchy or some of those concepts, because to me, I'm not against anything. It's me saying, great, how can we use some of these experiences and stories and energies and other ways of relating to the world in a way that might serve us both individually and globally? And each person gets to decide that for themselves. Like my husband is totally an alpha male, guys. He was a firefighter, a construction worker, and yet he has a lot of feminine energy. But for him, if he tried to like really be in tune with the moon cycles, I don't think that's his thing. So he has to like figure out what is his experience of that. And truthfully, we need fully shining women. We need fully shining men. We need fully shining transgender people and non-binary people and whatever other description you might have of yourself, so that we can come up with a creative solutions to help our planet and to support each other. So for me, my personal calling is around women, but that doesn't put down men or exclude men or anyone who identifies in any other way. It's like, what can we gain from any one of those perspectives that might enable us to be more in tune with ourselves and each other and with Mama Earth.
What a beautiful message of an invitation to share and integrate and inclusivity, and to shine together.
Yeah.
As our fullest selves. Yeah, I love that. That feels like a good note for us to kind of come to a close on. So thank you, Meghan. And if people are interested in connecting with you and finding out more about what you're doing, where can they go?
So the place that my community lives, and it is for women, women who identify as women, is Fully Shining Women Leading Our World, and also the Fully Shining Women Wisdom School. And we're gathering over on Mighty Networks, which is this amazing platform. It feels like a sacred, safe space. There's community and connection, and not the algorithms and ads. And you can go there. You can go to sisters.fullyshiningwomen.com, and I know you're going to put that in the show notes. And you can either come into the free side, or if you'd like to go deeper and explore the spiral path and some of the other ideas and live gatherings, more support, the Wisdom School is available for that. And then I'm also happy to offer some freebies if you want to download some meditations. We'll also put that in the show notes. And of course, you can always come to my website, which is meghangilroy.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I love what you're up to, Meghan. Thanks so much for joining me for today's Wildspire conversation. If you'd like to receive a weekly Wildspire email from me filled with inspiring stories unmarketing experiments, tips for playing your way to impact and income without the hustle and hype, insights from my spiritual business journey, and more, go to theawakenedbusiness.com/wildspire. Until next time, may you know yourself as the gorgeous wild creation you are.